Well, it's that time of year, folks. I'm doing my annual NFL playoff prediction picks. We got all 12 teams lined up. Wild card matchups are set. Let's hop right into it. Let's start over in the AFC. We got Pittsburgh, division winners, taking on Baltimore, sniffing the playoffs, a 10-6 record. I don't know. I really want this to be a more competitive matchup. If this were Indianapolis against Baltimore or Cincinnati against Baltimore, I might be more inclined to kind of say, the Ravens might have a bit of an advantage here. But just the way these two teams have played this year, I think Pittsburgh is a better offensive team. They're better at running the ball. Baltimore might have just slightly better defense, but I think the Pittsburgh offense is going to have really no problem getting over the hurdles here. And I think they easily knock off the Ravens and punch in a date as the third seed against second seed of Denver in the second round. Also, in the AFC wildcard round, we got Indianapolis taking on Cincinnati, and this is really an interesting matchup because the last 2 years, Andy Dalton and Andrew Luck have played very well, but they're also choke artists. In this matchup, I'm kind of don't really think either of these teams would go far if they advance. So spoiler for that, and the next round against New England. But just looking at the track record of these two teams, what they've been playing this year, I think Indianapolis is a little bit more consistent. They're more reliable with their offense. They can put more points on the board. Cincinnati probably has a better defense, but I just think Andrew Luck can get that offensive juggernaut going. And in case you noticed, Andy Dalton, he can't win in January. Andrew Luck, he can't win in the second round, but he can certainly win the first round. And I think that is once again the case this year. The Colts advance. The Bengals go back to the drawing board. So that's our AFC divisional matchups. New England against Indy, Denver against Pittsburgh. But first, before we get into that, let's go look at the NFC wildcard round. Dallas and Detroit. Now, earlier we were talking about choke artists, and there is no greater modern NFL playoff choke artist than Tony Romo and the Dallas Cowboys. They've been 8-8 for a couple of years. They went 12-4 and won the division. And it's one of those things where you kind of wonder, when does the illusion disappear? At what point does this team turn into a pumpkin? And looking at this matchup, Detroit, arguably the best defensive unit statistically in the NFL over the regular season. Dallas, certainly one of the most high-powered offenses. These matchups, it's almost a dead, giveaway here. You go with the team with defense. Detroit, they've had trouble with the offense, almost got beat by the Falcons. They've had some low-scoring affairs. Obviously, offensive-powered teams like Green Bay can defeat them. So is Dallas in that category? We know Dallas, they put points on Philadelphia. They put points on Indianapolis. I can't remember who they played yesterday. Was it the Washington Redskins? I think they just totally outpointed. For Dallas to win this game, they have to score a lot of points. For Detroit to win, they have to score a lot of points. I don't really see this being a shootout. But I do see this, believe it or not, leaning towards Dallas. Yes, I'm going to give Tony Romo the benefit of the doubt. I think they actually win a playoff game in January. As a third seed, that means they're going to Lambeau Field a week later to take on the Packers. And that's another interesting matchup, but more on that later. Carolina against Arizona. Carolina, 7-8-1 record. Arizona, a team who, for most of the season, was statistically, as far as the win-loss percentage goes, the best team in pro football. Then Carson Palmer got hurt. Then their backup got hurt. And now they're pretty much limping the playoffs with their third-string quarterback. You look at Carolina, the way they've played the last couple of weeks, they have played quite well. Cam Newton, after having that truck accident, is apparently Wolverine because he's come back and he's been on fire. And the thing that really surprised me is just how good the Carolina defense has been. They've just been nailing it. Watching that Falcons game yesterday, that was just really revelatory. This might actually be a team that's better than a team with what's their record like now? The percentage, 4-8-7. Well, anyway, Arizona, I think, is just a pitiful shell of a team. They're really a snake bit going into the playoffs. And I think the Panthers, as good as their defense has been playing, they're going to win this one. They move on to the divisional playoffs. They take on Seattle. Well, now, while we're at the NFC, might as well do that before we hop over back to the AFC. Seattle against Carolina. Carolina, like I said, I've been very impressed with what they've been doing. I think their defense is much improved. I think Cam Newton has come alive. But Seattle, they're still Seattle. They are an incredibly explosive offensive unit, a powerful defense. They can throw the ball. They can run the ball. They can kick a lot of field goals if they have to. You know, I want to say this is going to be a much more competitive matchup than what we would assume. I think Carolina can make this a close game. This may not exactly be the blowout we expect. This could be like a 29-21 game. Carolina, they're going to make it competitive, but I think there are just way too many weapons on the Seahawks lineup. I mean, this really is basically the Seahawks team this year is basically what happens when you combine Kurt Warner's Rams with that Buccaneers defense from 2003. They're just an incredibly, almost overpowered team on both sides of the ball. And with that in mind, I think they knock off Carolina in a fairly thrilling game. It goes down on the wire. Green Bay against Dallas. Tony Romo. You know, he's going to mess up at some point. It's a given. This team is not going to win the Super Bowl. They just can't do it. The fate, everything, the entire universe is against him and this team. It's historically proven. And Green Bay, you know, very, very solid team, but they have shown weaknesses this year. Going back to that very first game of the NFL season where Seattle just ran roughshod over them. I think the key to beating Green Bay, especially at Lambeau, is pretty simple. You score a lot of points early, you keep the pressure on, you run the ball, you can beat them. And I look at this Dallas team, and I can't believe I'm saying this, I think they can do that. I think they can put the points on the board. I think they can get the offense rolling. I think they can go tit for tat with Green Bay, and I think they can pretty much overpower them offensively. The defense is good enough. The O-line, I think, is solid enough to kind of keep Romo from eating too much dirt. And I think Dallas, against all odds, ends up beating Green Bay in a very, very close game, like 23-20, something like that. And moves on to their first NFC Championship since, like, what, 1996? So Seattle, Dallas, that's my pick for the NFC Championship game. Back to the AFC. New England against Indianapolis. You know, Andrew, look, you're a great quarterback. The dude puts up a lot of points. Actually, you know, this year he actually surpassed Peyton Manning for the most yards ever chunked by a Colts quarterback, which is pretty impressive. He's got a good team. They're going to dominate the AFC South for a long time. But the thing is, they're just not that good. They're not good enough to compete against the Colts. Oh, well, obviously they compete against the Colts. They are the Colts. They're not going to compete against the Patriots. They're not going to compete against the Broncos. You know, all the teams in the AFC Central, you know, they could probably beat them up. I think Luck, he's going to go in there and I'm not even gonna lie, he's going to get smashed. Patriots, no-name offense, no-name defense, just have their way with the Colts and head to yet another AFC Championship. And a quick question to everyone watching this video. How many AFC Championship games has Tom Brady been to now? It has to be approaching some kind of record. I lost count over the years. We're probably at 10, maybe even a dozen, for all I know. Denver against Pittsburgh. This is probably the most interesting matchup, I'm going to say, in the entire playoff spectrum. Pittsburgh, Ben Roethlisberger, we saw those games earlier where he was throwing like 6 touchdowns a game. They got a solid run game, good defense. Denver, there are definitely some weak spots in their armor. This is a team that is not as good as a team that played last year. Obviously, they can throw the ball. They obviously can run the ball, as we saw yesterday against the Raiders. And the defense, that's what kind of gives me some trepidation. I think they'll leave some holes open. And if you put pressure on Peyton Manning, we know this. Seattle proved it. We saw that in the Chargers game earlier this year. Was it Chargers? Chargers or Chiefs, anyway. They just kept the pressure on Peyton Manning, and they couldn't do anything. The Pittsburgh defense is good, but I don't think it's that good. I think they're going to, put some pressure on the quarterback, but at the end of the day, I just think Denver has too many offensive weapons. Denver, not Pittsburgh. Denver has more offensive weapons. Pittsburgh just not that good of a defensive team to keep them going. Should be close. 28-21, a one-touchdown game, but I'm going to go with the Broncos. So we have Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, once again in the AFC Championship. Last year the Broncos won. This year I'm going to go with the Patriots. You look at what Tom Brady's doing. Look at what Bill Belichick is doing. This is a team with virtually no big-name star players outside of their quarterback and Gronk. But they have a tremendous run game. They don't have like a guy who's out there like Barry Sanders, putting a ton of points on the board. They just have a solid run game, a very, very good defensive core, great O-line. They can keep the ball moving, excellent ball control. They keep the clock in their favor. That's how you win championships. Denver, they might be more star-studded. They might be more explosively offensive, but overall, New England is a more technically impressive and intellectual team. And I hate Peyton Manning. I also hate Tom Brady, but got to go with New England. And that's going to send Tom Brady to what I believe is his 6th Super Bowl appearance, which has to be some sort of record for a quarterback. If it's not, I will be absolutely aghast. Okay, NFC Championship game. Seattle, Dallas. If New England plays Dallas Super Bowl, the NFL is going to be so happy. They're going to be making a lot of money. They're going to be charging extra for Super Bowl commercials. But it's not happening. Seattle, like I said, this team is just unparalleled, I think, in NFL history, because you look at some of the best teams we've had over the years. The great 49ers team of the 80s. The Cowboys team of the 90s. They're very much offensive oriented. That's how they won championships. You look at the Steelers, 85 Bears. Those are teams that won with defense. And this is a team that wins on both sides of the ball. They win offensively, they win defensively. There really isn't like a major weak point in this entire squad. Obviously they are beatable. There are ways to knock them off. But overall, I think this team, if they just play even half of how they played throughout the regular season, they're going to have no problem with Romo. And I think the dream season comes to a crunching end. This is where the O-line, I think, just dissolves. They put the pressure on him. He keeps getting sacked. We're throwing some pick sixes here. And Seattle will end up punching their ticket to a 2nd consecutive Super Bowl. So far, Super Bowl this year, we got the Seattle Seahawks against the New England Patriots. Now, earlier in the year, I made a video where I predicted Seattle to win the Super Bowl against Baltimore, but obviously with Ray Rice and a lot of quarterback problems, I had to go the opposite way. But New England against Seattle, clearly the two best teams in pro football. New England clearly the class of the AFC, Seattle clearly the class of the NFC. Very rarely do we get to see the best of both worlds go down and check things out toe-to-toe. Now, this one I think is going to be a good one. Last year was a blowout. Obviously, the Seattle defense came out and they're just rolling, and they got off to a good start, and they just crushed the Broncos. And then the Ips set in, and Peyton Manning couldn't do anything. I don't think it's going to happen this year. I think this is going to be a very close game. This is going to be one of those old-school championship slugfest. Tit for tat. New England touchdown, Seattle touchdown, New England touchdown. It's going to be very much like watching one of the old-school showdowns, like the Green Bay against Denver in '97, where it's just two teams that can put points on the board. And so with that in mind, when you have two really great offenses, and both these teams are absolutely marvelous at running the ball, I can't tell you how important that is to winning games. If you can run the ball efficiently, that means you control the clock, and that's usually how you win games. It's a very technical thing that a lot of teams can't really accomplish. Both these teams are absolutely superb at that. So when you have a solid offense, when you have a great passing game, when you have a very solid running game, what do you go to as a tiebreaker? And of course, we all know what that is. Offense wins games, defense wins championships. Seattle, a much more impressive defensive team than New England. We've seen that. The Temple of Boom knows how to put the pressure on the quarterback. They know how to deflect passes. They know how to break up games. They know how to take even seasoned quarterbacks like Peyton Manning completely out of games. Then they leave it with the offense. They exploit the weak links in the defense, and that's how they win games. Ultimately, I think the Seahawks will end up repeating. It's going to be a close game. I think probably heading into halftime it's going to be a tied game. But I think as this game goes along, they're going to get tired. Tom Brady, he's going to show some weaknesses. He's going to take a slip or two, and that's when Seattle's defense capitalizes. They crush him. The offense gets on the field, and I think by the fourth quarter, the onslaught of points is on, and the Seahawks win their second consecutive Super Bowl. And at this point, you got to start saying to yourself, they got two in a row. They have dominated arguably two of the best quarterbacks of the era, back-to-back. What happens next? Is this the first team in NFL history to win 3 championships in a row? If they retain that core, they're playing outstanding. I think it's within the realm of possibility. As far as Super Bowl MVP, I'm going to go with Marshawn Lynch. I got him getting at least 2 rushing touchdowns, maybe even a really awesome beast mode run. And defense, once again, keeps this thing going. But of course, all comes down to getting points on the board. I think Seattle is just a bit better than New England at doing both. Therefore, your 2014-2015 Super Bowl champions, second year in a row, your Seattle Seahawks.